folks. It's a lovely, lovely Sunday afternoon. It's very nice to see so many of you today. I'll go ahead and get started with sort of my introduction and overview so I can allow plenty of time for Sarah and Carissa. There's a lot of important information to cover. I'm Cindy Van Kuren. I'm the president-elect for the Ohio Psychological Association. And OPA has been working so hard to try and keep up with all the different forums, the comments, the questions on the listserv, and our response has been to offer these Q&A sessions, and in this case, an assembly, where we can just try to provide information to respond, or a bigger response to people who keep asking questions about how they can contribute, how they can look out for their patients, how they can look out for their families during these really stressful times. So we're very grateful to Drs. Zaril and Fogarty for their contribution today. And again, just how quickly the number of registrants added up this week shows how valuable this information is for all of us. And we have many, I'm really excited looking at the names that are popping up here. We have many VIPs, but I can't help but notice Dr. Sandy Schulman is with us, our very own APA president. Welcome, Dr. Schulman. So nice to have you. Let me go over just a couple of housekeeping things before I introduce our speakers. We are starting off with everyone being muted because we've just had some painful lessons learned this week. You can unmute yourself when you'd like to contribute. If you move your mouse towards the bottom of the screen, you'll see a ribbon pop up. On the far left, you'll see a little picture of a microphone and it says mute. To unmute yourself, you would just click on that button. To remute yourself, you would do the same. There's also an option for a chat box. On that same ribbon, if you move over just right of center, you can select the chat box. Now the chat box default will go to everyone. Everyone is able to see that so that you can ask questions throughout. You can also email me as the MC, or you can email Drs. Zaril or Fogarty with specific questions as well, but those will be private and only able to be read by those individuals. I'm going to monitor the chat throughout so that these ladies can stay focused on the information that they're sharing. And so I will be kind of introducing the questions as they come up. And with that, let me please introduce our fantastic speakers. Dr. Carissa Fogarty is currently the co-chair of the OPA Committee on Social Responsibility and is passionate about involvement in the community and helping others. After graduating from Ohio University with her BA in psychology, she moved to California and received her doctorate in clinical psychology from the American School of Professional Psychology at Argosy University. Carissa spent 2 years of clinical training working in the inpatient setting before moving on to her present position at university hospitals. Currently, Carissa is a psychologist in an outpatient facility for UH, where she works with adolescents and individuals in late adolescence through the lifespan. Her interests are in transitional age youth, college-age population, women's mental health, trauma-informed care, and anxiety disorders. Additionally, she works in the UH Mood Disorders Intensive Outpatient Programs. We welcome Dr. Fogarty. And Dr. Sarah Zaril is the current co-chair of the OPA Committee on Social Responsibility. She attended undergraduate college at the University of Toledo and graduated with a BA in psychology. She then moved to Chicago and attended the Illinois School of Professional Psychology at Argosy University. Sarah obtained an MA degree in clinical psychology and then transferred into the PsyD program to complete her doctorate degree in clinical psychology. Sarah works at university hospitals in Cleveland with an adult outpatient population. Her main areas of interest and expertise are in adult psychology, anxiety disorders, exposure therapy, grief and loss, post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma-focused therapy, trauma-informed care, women's health, women's mental health issues, and college mental health. She is passionate about social justice, diversity, and issues relative to social responsibility. These two women have done so much work, and we're all really excited to have them and looking forward to what you have to share. And with that, I'll turn the floor over.
Well, I just want to say thank you everyone for coming. It's a great turnout and I know it's really nice outside, so we appreciate you taking some time to be inside with us today. We have a bit of an agenda. We have a lot of different questions and some great topics, and Sarah is actually going to get us started, so I'll let her take over.
All right. Yes, as Carissa said, we really appreciate everybody that is in attendance today. We know with our current circumstances, there's probably a lot of anxiety, worry, feelings of being overwhelmed with issues related to social justice and social responsibility at this time. So we're going to cover a lot of topics and try to get through as much as we can. Again, like Cindy said, you can always email Carissa or myself for more information down the line if you have any additional questions. Because there is a lot of information, we're going to kind of touch base on the most important points, and everybody should be receiving resource lists related to most of the topics we're talking about. And there might be some updates to those as well, which will be posted on the OPA website as updates come up. So some of the topics we're going to cover will include food and resource insecurity, employment and unemployment issues, and then financial hardship related to student loan payments. So let's start. I guess the way we're going to format this is we have some discussion questions. We can kind of get people's thoughts and feelings related to these questions. And then depending on how those go, then we'll provide resources as necessary for people's thoughts and questions. So we will start with kind of the unemployment/employment topic. And the question that I'm going to pose to the group is, for those struggling with unemployment, or have people in your family that are unemployed, or are working with patients who are now unemployed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, are there any thoughts, feelings, or questions people may have related to the unemployment process and also the newly approved stimulus package?
Hi, this is Virginia Clark.
Hi.
While I do have someone at one or two people at home that are unemployed, one that's partially employed online, but I actually am more concerned about my office staff and how to actually keep them employed. I understand that there's some recent bills passed that would allow me to apply for a grant to cover their salaries or their hours. It might even cover my rent, certain other things, and I don't know if this is beyond the scope of your question, but I do know that here in Ohio, I know I got some information from I think it was Rob Portman regarding that information, the actual bills related to that. So that may apply to other folks who are here on the call. That you are an employee. You employ other people. But who knows what that process looks like. I'm trying to not lay off my employees. Well, I'll stop.
Sure. Did you have the names of those bills that you were referring to? Are they different than the stimulus package that was just recently approved?
I think so. Hang on one second. CARES. Hang on a second. Let me pull that up. I have the actual wording of the bill here. CARES, Division A, keeping workers paid and employed healthcare system enhancements and economic stabilization. And let's see what else. That was one of them. From the Senate, it was just more of a title, $340 billion surge in emergency funding to combat coronavirus outbreak, and that was from the Senate Appropriations Committee. And then, oh, here we go. The final, the actual bill, I think it's House of Representatives 748. It's providing emergency assistance and healthcare response for individuals, families, and businesses affected by the 2020 coronavirus pandemic. And I was sent those by Rob Portman. So if anyone wants more information, I'm sure they could write either their representative or their senators.
Virginia, this is Michael. If you forward that to me, I'll see if we can get it up on our resource page, because that sounds like information that other people would need.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that was really great information. The majority of what we've looked into for this talk was just sort of unemployment policies and changes with the stimulus package. But I think it's really important to have all of the resources that we could for during this time.
I know too, once it was, you know, said that we were in a national emergency, a lot of funds were released for business loans as well. So maybe not grants, but the loan piece is there just in case for small businesses.
I wondered if you have any guidance about people who are independent contractors and don't have work, or between jobs and don't have work, and how they, other than the check that all citizens receive, how they might act, whether there are any opportunities via unemployment for them.
Sure. Maybe a good idea to go over some of the updates on the unemployment website that I did find. You will also get a full Q&A sheet that's going to have a lot of more detailed information. But so obviously with what is going on, our governor did declare a emergency situation that allows people to go online and apply for unemployment and not have to wait for the typical 1 week period. Before the stimulus package went into play, it seemed as though individual contractors were not included in these benefits because they weren't paying into unemployment insurance. So with the stimulus package, that seems to have changed, and it's going to qualify for individuals that wouldn't typically qualify for unemployment. Let me just pull up this resource really quickly. So that would be the additional $600 that people would receive that typically wouldn't receive the unemployment benefit per payment for 4 months. And it expands unemployment to people that typically would not qualify for unemployment in Ohio.
Thank you.
And if I could just mention, as you're referring to that website, I was talking with my cousin yesterday, who's a full generation younger than me, and she's been working really hard to help her older coworkers who are not adept with technology figure out how to get through this process. So please keep that in mind as well with our patients who maybe aren't comfortable with technology and are looking for help, or for those of us who've been looking for ways to volunteer. Just another option for us to be helpful to people trying to navigate the already complicated system of unemployment.
Absolutely. I know major complaints by patients that I work with currently, and I know Carissa can resonate with this as well, is that the website has been extremely slow. It continues to kind of crash. People are getting kicked off mid-application because you're still having to go on every week and sort of recertify or reapply that you're unemployed. I don't know if they're going to change that with the new stimulus package and dates that they have into play, but a lot of people are having issues website-based, and I can imagine that being even more difficult for people that aren't really technology savvy to figure out. Some people that I work with that are having problems with that said when they're going on at non-typical times, they're having a little bit more luck. I don't know if anybody has similar experiences with people that they work with, or if you've had to go on the website and fill out any form of application.
Yeah, like you said, Sarah, that was something I was going to speak to. I've been helping a lot of people in my family, people who just don't know as much about technology, and going on and walking them through the process and helping them apply for unemployment. And I've had that difficulty almost every time, because everybody from what I've been seeing has to go on the same day each week. And with the influx of people who are now applying for it, it makes it very difficult. You know, you get through one page and the website crashes. So it's been a lot of self-care, you know, doing something for an hour and then making sure you step away from it, take a break. Just like with anything, you know, when we're talking about, especially people working from home, you know, signing off and making sure, you know, you're not LinkedIn at all minutes. But that's definitely been something I was struggling with too. So I appreciate you both bringing that up.
I do know in addition as well, because people are having such kind of trouble with the website, some people are going on and filling out multiple requests at a time and getting different confirmation numbers. If you do know of anybody doing that, you know, it's sort of slowing down the system as a whole, because once you have one confirmation number, even though you might not hear back like right away, they are going down the line and trying to get through all the confirmation numbers. So if people are having more than one, then it's going to slow the system down even more. So there's a lot on the website saying, you know, once you have your confirmation number, like you do not have to refill this out again within the same week period, even if you have confirmation or correspondence right away. They also took away the requirement to search for jobs during this time. Since it's declared a national emergency, there isn't the requirement of having to submit to jobs a week that you've applied for. And they did put a couple restrictions on the website in terms of people that wouldn't qualify for unemployment. For instance, if you were imposing a self-quarantine just out of your choice, but you weren't symptomatic, and those unemployment benefits would not be available if you know, you were just choosing to self-quarantine and not work to like avoid exposure to COVID. And then in terms of people that are still partially employed, they basically said they would take what you're still making compared to what you lost to figure out what your benefit would be. So it's not that you have to be fully unemployed at this point. Even if you have a small loss of income, they can determine a benefit that would be appropriate for each person. Now, with the timeline, typically it's a 26-week period that people would be able to qualify for unemployment. I'm not sure if that is going to be expanded per state based on the stimulus package that was kind of indicated, so I'm waiting for updates on that. But with the stimulus package, it increases the benefit amount with an additional $600 for a 4-month period, like I said earlier. And the reason for that is the goal of trying to get people as close as you could to their salary before they lost the income. Because typically with unemployment, you're not getting the full amount that you would make. It's only a percentage of what you would make. So with the stimulus package, the goal is to sort of get you closer to what you were making before. I'm wondering if the state is going to expand regular unemployment benefits for individual contractors and things like that. The website has not been updated since the stimulus package was approved, so that's something that we'll keep an eye on for everybody. Does anyone have questions on like the stimulus package as a whole in terms of what people will be receiving for their one-time benefit? Any of the eligibility requirements? We are going to be sending a sheet out on this with more information, but I want to make sure that we answer any questions about those that we can.
This isn't necessarily a question, but a comment that I'm aware there's already scammers trying to take advantage of folks calling and saying, we've got your stimulus check, give us your bank account number so that we can deposit it. So again, please look out for our patients who maybe could use some advice during these times.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, I've heard many times of, you know, sometimes like elderly individuals getting scammed into giving their personal information, you know, especially people with dementia and things like that. So it's something to definitely watch out for.
I can kind of speak to that on a personal level too. I got an email just from, it said it came up as like PayPal, but it actually wasn't. So I looked into who was sending it because the email just kind of looked funky, and I could have easily clicked on it. It said like my PayPal account had been suspended for some reason. And I reached out to PayPal directly and they were like, no, we did not send this. So I think kind of across the board, scammers, hackers, lots of different individuals are coming in all different platforms. So it's something to be mindful of.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, some people taking advantage of what's going on right now.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we have another discussion topic around this same sort of employment issue. So maybe we can get into that. And if there's more questions, we can always circle back to this if we have time at the end as well. So our next question for everybody is, for those that are still required to report to work or are working with patients that still have to report to work and feel anxious about their risk of exposure to COVID, what are resources or suggestions people are using or having patients use to work through these feelings effectively? I know this is something a lot of people are anxious about and has been coming up in my work with patients consistently.
One thing I wanted to say is that I work at the Cleveland Clinic, and we are already setting up a system where the mental health providers are volunteering time to be available for sessions and support to the frontline staff. And there was something that came across on the OPA listserv yesterday. I don't know if either of you saw that, but there were, Melissa Davies had sent the email out, and there's something called Give an Hour, a charitable service that allows her to donate mental health services to veterans and others in need. And she was wondering if there was a similar effort for healthcare workers and first responders. So I don't know if you want to look at that and respond to that. There were a number of people who expressed interest in volunteering. I just told them I'd bring it up at the forum.
Yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. I did not have the chance to see that yet, but that is something we'll definitely look into on the website. And I think a good way for us to be able to give back and work with people that are, worried about their exposure to COVID as well.
This is Sandy. I have a question, perhaps for Michael. Do we still have in place a disaster resource network?
We really don't, Sandy, unfortunately. It's
Because
kind of
that
being
might-
run through Sarah's committee at the moment.
Okay. Because that might be something we want to not only try to connect or start for this, but something that might be useful to have in the future.
Yeah, I
Going to
know
say that. Oh, go ahead.
a number of states are using their disaster response network for pro bono, to provide pro bono services to people who need it. And actually a number of people have emailed me or posted on the listserv some interest in seeing OPA get something started. Been talking to a couple of the larger state directors, and the way that seems to make the most sense to me is to do it in collaboration with some of the other mental health professional associations, so social workers, counselors, psychiatrists, and kind of collaborate with them to set up a program. We do have a coalition of those providers. So I thought I'd approach them and see if they would be interested in working together to try to set up some kind of volunteer service for our members to help people in the community who need it.
To answer the question at a more, at a more concrete level about clients who are concerned about their employment situation and their exposure, one of the really basic things that I do is make sure that they are linked to our county health department. Either we look up information right there, and often with an eye to do this at home, do this on your phone, because I think part of the issue is, for all of us, these recommendations keep changing and shifting so rapidly. And at least our county health department, and in general, I think the Ohio Department of Health has done a really good job with information and communication. And they're linked locally. Our county health department has been working very closely with employers around those sorts of issues. So I think at the what to do to protect yourself if you are at work, county health department is probably the best thing. If you have questions that your employer is wildly violating expectations in the law, county health department, I think is helpful. Obviously not a legal advisor. And that's sort of different from the issue about should I continue, life issues about for my family, what should I do? Should I continue this? So, but just at that, if you're going to do it, I think our health departments are useful.
This is Elizabeth Harris. I just wanted to also make a comment to Sandy's question about the disaster response relief program. And I believe that at one point, having been run through the Committee on Social Responsibility, was a contact, someone who had worked through the Red Cross, and possibly an opportunity for CIT training, crisis intervention training, that is. And that's one of the things that we as a committee have been trying to reintroduce for quite a while now. So we're looking forward to, now is a better time than any to try and reestablish the crisis intervention training in whatever way possible, whether it be collaborating with other professionals, or if any of you have any resources that would make that easier for us to do. So if anyone knows of a way where we can tap into maybe an already existing resource, such as like those that Red Cross provides, then we'd be happy to hear those suggestions.
And I wonder if the folks involved with Priority 3, which I think, Sarah, you're involved with Priority 3, might already have some feelers out on that in ways that we could kind of get on board and support that effort as well. And just as the time monitor, I'm just going to let you know that in about 3 minutes, we'll move on to the next topic, just to make sure we devote a substantive amount of time to each of the 3 areas, and then we should have some time to circle back at the end.
Yeah, I think this is something we have been talking about at our priority meetings, and that we were going to be circling back to in terms of doing some sort of CIT training or getting involved with first responders. And that was something that I know Mark Labula was working on as well. So maybe that is something I could touch base with him on and see if we have any way that we can get involved during this time.
This is Mary Jo Gavin. I'm up here at UTMC Medical Center here in Toledo. And we, like Cleveland Clinic, are setting up a network of volunteers to help our first responders. But my thought was that we're pretty much focused on our particular hospital setting. I'm not sure there's a lot of discussion with some of the other hospitals in our region about what they're doing. And I'm not sure that there's, I will kind of check into what's being done with our county health department, because it's a good resource for our employees, but for those people who are, perhaps the grocery workers and the other workers that are out there that are not necessarily directly associated with healthcare, but are considered first line responders here, dealing with people on a day-to-day basis, there might be a better way for our community to set something up for counseling for those people who are having to go out there and feel like they may not be totally protected, and just need to have somebody where they can kind of talk about and get some good feedback about how they can take care of themselves in the midst of this crisis. So that's all evolving. Even our own volunteer program at UTMC, that's like in its setup phase now. We are not actively doing it, although I expect within the next week or two that will get started. But yes, I think it's fine for us that are in healthcare. We're starting to recognize that we have to have something for our people, but also the ones that are in our community that may not be directly associated with healthcare would probably need some resources as well. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think so much of this really focuses on people in the healthcare system. You know, you hear a lot about how people are still required to report to work, and there's so much anxiety around potential exposure to COVID, but those other workers, you know, grocery store workers, people like that are getting sort of like pushed to the wayside. So a way that we can sort of come together and focus on those groups as well would be really beneficial.
And I just posted something in the chat. I'm very active with my local library, so I know a lot of the local libraries have platforms in place that perhaps you could collaborate with your library and just say, I want to push out this forum or Q&A or chance to talk or stress management tips. They might be able to set that up with you. And with that, I'm going to invite that we shift over to Carissa to move on to our second area of discussion, the elderly and vulnerable populations.
All right, thanks, Cindy, and thanks, Sarah. So I wanted to focus today on working with elderly and vulnerable populations as well as children, but specifically related to the topic of food insecurity. Right now, I mean, in Ohio, generally, food insecurity is a very important and something that we struggle with. And so I thought, especially now with schools being closed, with grocery stores running out of products, and just the climate of how things are, I think it's a really important topic for us to address. So I also brought some discussion questions, and I'm hoping that this can be a forum for us to maybe even just share resources that we have. There are so many out there. I'm familiar more with some in the Cleveland area, but I have been trying to do more research to broaden that, and I know everyone in here is from all over. So with that, I'm just going to start maybe with some questions, and then we can go from there. So the first question that I have is, for those that, I'm going to focus on elderly and vulnerable populations and then moving into children. So for those that live with or work directly with the elderly or more vulnerable populations, what barriers are you finding difficult to manage in terms of food resources or food security, if any?
Well, there's a change in the food delivery system to that population, that happens in two ways. Food, all of the places that sponsor Tuesday night dinners are cutting back. They may still have some, but so first it's reduced in frequency, and then next it's because it's delivered socially, it's transferred into grab and go, and for good reasons, but people who go to those for both their social connection and the food, and who are scared, are I heard a little bit about being put off by the grab and go, and then there's, of course, it's just less available. So the typical under-resourced food delivery system is even more under-resourced. That's an obvious.
Right, it's been similar. I know I usually volunteer at a Monday night dinner, and obviously for reasons of social distancing and not being able to have more than 10 people in a place at once, that's something that has been canceled and moved more so into the, like you said, grab and go or drive through for individuals that can drive. I do want to point out, in some of, like I said, I'm more familiar with the Cleveland area, but please share about others, that a lot of the food banks and food pantries still are asking for volunteers. So I know that it's kind of a scary and confusing time of, you know, we want to social distance and we're worried about exposure, and yet a lot of these programs are still running, like Meals on Wheels, and how do we get involved maybe and in a safe way for ourselves.
I think another thing too, just as Carissa was talking about, we recently had our Committee on Social Responsibility meeting, and we were talking about how do we still get involved in the issue of food insecurity. We were planning on doing a week focusing on food insecurity and doing volunteer work in April, and that sort of has had to be halted as a result of what is going on currently and it not being safe to be in large groups. You know, so one way that we talked about at the meeting was, you know, maybe we can still have sort of this week-long time period where we're considering food insecurity, but also giving people options of ways they can make monetary donations and get involved in ways that are still safe based on what's going on. So that's something that will be coming out, information on that, probably in the next newsletter that we have.
Yeah, one other comment about volunteers, you know, to Chris's point, there are fewer volunteers, right? There people are obviously, and also an enormous number of volunteers are seniors, the people who work the food banks and are invested. You know, many seniors now, my next career is being a volunteer, and so they're correctly staying home, and at the same time, then that's creating even more shortage of the really important. You just need people to make food, right? You can't replace that, or it's hard to replace that digitally.
I think it's also important to remember that sometimes as psychologists, we can be the conductors of how treatment goes with our patients. So even if it means just connecting those that we work with our social work or caseworker colleagues, so that they can get the resources they need, either through area on aging or whatever the name of the resource is in your area, that can help a ton, just like walking them through the process of getting connected with them and showing what kinds of needs that person may have, and then like finding ways to have someone who can meet them at the grocery store and help them to shop in a way that they're not used to typically shopping.
I appreciate you bringing that up. One of the, so I'll be sending out resources as well, just like Sarah, in regard to food insecurity. And I was creating kind of a document on helpful tips and things to remember. And, you know, as a psychologist, we come in, we help people kind of work through anxiety and process everything that's happening right now. And I think a big part of what my job has felt like recently as a psychologist is kind of a case manager. So collaborating with our colleagues, to our case managers, social workers, it's a very important time to do that. You know, in the last few weeks, I have learned so much, and it kind of reminds me, okay, a lot of these resources and things are here even when this isn't happening. And so to kind of take these with us going forward and to remember all of these things exist, how do we use them and how do we connect patients with them? Some of those helpful tips I was thinking about are, you know, asking neighbors or elderly family members, you know, if you're already going out to the store, can I pick something up for you? And keeping in mind also, and this will go more when we're talking more about the women, infants, and children and SNAP food stamps, but also being mindful about what we're buying when we're at the store, not overbuying, and maybe keeping in mind looking for the label of WIC. You know, if we have an option to buy one or the other, somebody may not have that option. So keeping some of those things in mind. I'm gonna, just for the sake of time, I'm gonna move on to just the next question about resources. So are there any resources in particular that anyone has found helpful in regard to food insecurity or food resources for the elderly or the more vulnerable populations?
I think one that I've been sharing with a lot of my elderly patients are the special, shopping hours that have been put forth, like in the morning time. I know each store differs in terms of what time they're doing this, but they are specifying certain hours where they're primarily letting elderly individuals and then immunocompromised or more vulnerable populations shop during these times. Some of my patients that don't really use technology as much or social media, they weren't as up to date on those things. So that was something to talk about. And I think you're 100% right, Carissa. It's sort of like taking on a little bit of a case management role at this time with these sort of things, but that's what our patients need. So it's like, how do we meet our patients with where they're at in the moment?
On the resource sheet that I'll be sending out, there's some information there. I have about 10 different stores listed and what their hours are. Of course, it's always important in your specific area, reach out to that individual location just to make sure, but it is great how the stores are stepping up as well. And even walking through the line, remembering just to say thank you to the workers that are still there, showing that appreciation. We talked about the anxieties that come along with working in the food industry right now. I was looking into things like Instacart, and a lot of their workers are feeling incredibly overwhelmed right now in terms of coming into contact with new people. And as more of them stop, right, the delivery people for Uber Eats or all of those different types of delivery services, some of them are stopping because they're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of work and the anxiety about coming into contact with so many people. But I will send out, like I said, on the resource sheet, some information regarding what stores are included in this and what their new hours may be. And remembering that's for not just elderly populations, but also other vulnerable populations, individuals who may be immunocompromised or have underlying health conditions.
This is Virginia Clark. Just real quick, I think some of the farmers markets have gone to online ordering, and how that works is they will pack up what you order. I think you have to order a couple days in advance, and they will you just have to drive by and they will hand it into your car. So that only, of course, works for people that do have a car, but that's something, fruits and vegetables are really important in terms of fighting off the coronavirus. And so I just thought I'd mention that. And they may be less expensive than the grocery store.
Thank you for that. That's awesome. I didn't know about that. And it might help people feel safer not having to walk into the grocery store too.
Carissa, this is Elizabeth Harris again. I just wanted to make a comment. You mentioned about kids not being in school right now and them depending on having food or lunch, breakfast at school, and now there's no school. But I just want to say that I was pleasantly impressed by the Cleveland Public School system leading charge by saying that they were going to provide food for the students no matter what. It changed from them providing food, I think from at like 3 p.m. until some time, and then they decided that they were going to provide both breakfast and lunch for all students. And as a result, there's other area school districts, including my kids' school district, who decided during a certain time of the day, they're going to distribute that food to all the students. All you have to do is mention a name and then they provide it for free, which is absolutely wonderful because, of course, usually there's some fee, except for those who are eligible for free lunch, and everybody gets it no matter what their need is, as long as they show up. So I was really happy to see that. I'm just kind of curious to know if there's anything like that happening anywhere else in the state.
So I actually did some research into this as well. And on the Ohio Department of Education website, there's a map, and I'll include the link on here, but it shows all the schools that are open in this way, that are allowing students. And actually a lot of them don't even have to be students of the school or the school district. It's all children ages 1 through 18. If they need food, they can come in. So like I said, I'll provide that. And there's different schools. So some schools are open to all children, some are more targeted populations, and some have a more restricted open policy where you have to be a part of that school or part of that school district. But I did see a lot of that. And in Cleveland specifically, I'm not sure about other counties or other areas, they are providing shuttle services. So for students who obviously can't drive, they're not old enough, or their parents can't drive, or are used to public transportation, they will pick up the students, bring them to the school, and then bring them back home with their meals. And even after the social distancing piece, they're making sure not more students than can fit 6 feet apart comfortably are on the buses at one time. So just small things that they're doing. But like Elizabeth said, I'm not sure too much about what's happening outside of the Cleveland area, except for what's listed on the Ohio Department of Education. So if anyone has any other information for others, that would be great.
I saw
I did-
I
Go
saw
ahead.
something online where people in Italy, I believe it was putting green paper in their windows, and neighbors could drive by and they would see that these people need some food or need somebody to get their medicines for them. So I don't know if that's something that we could maybe help or get out there, that message.
I haven't
And
seen
I-
that, but that sounds really amazing. Go ahead,
I
John.
just noticed that the food banks have on their website, so the Feeding America food banks, and so for example, the Toledo Area Food Bank has a find food near you set of links. And I think what they've done is to step up their, to try to make those as current as possible. Undoubtedly, the information again is changing, might always be accurate, but that would be something else to a resource to share is the food bank, and go to that website, plug in your zip code, and it shows food near you along the line of groceries and donations and food pantries.
On the resource page, I do have, so the areas that I was able to find information, and if anybody would like me to search more into their area, please let me know and I will. I have the Free Store Food Bank in the Cincinnati area. And along with these food banks, they also help people with their SNAP benefits. And in the stimulus package that Sarah was mentioning earlier, there was an expansion for SNAP. So a lot more individuals can get benefits, and some of the requirements have been taken out. So it's open up to more individuals. You don't have to go in, at least in Ohio, you don't have to go in to apply for benefits anymore. They're allowing people to do it over the phone and waiving the blood work and labs that were necessary prior in order to get those benefits. But because of that, more people are obviously calling in for benefits. And so the places that I found were the Free Store Food Bank in Cincinnati, and the numbers will all be on here as well. The Greater Cleveland Food Bank, which serves multiple counties in the Cleveland area. The Mid-Ohio Food Bank, which also serves multiple counties. And then the Toledo Northwestern Ohio Food Bank, which then distributes to smaller food pantries throughout, I think there's like 8 counties listed here, and all of their information will be on this sheet.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, if there's any other areas that people are living in right now that aren't in the Toledo, Columbus, Cleveland, or Cincinnati and greater areas, please let me know, and I will be more than happy to look into that. The other kind of thing, I know we only have a few minutes remaining, but I did want to just talk about maybe what it's like having children at home or taking care of elderly in general at home right now. I know that this is a different time. We're used to, kids being at school and people being out and about as much, but I also wanted this to just kind of be a place where people can talk about their experiences. And even if it's not related to food insecurity specifically, we do have a few minutes if anyone has any questions or whatever it may be.
This is Sandy. I would share one, I've heard experiences that I've heard from many people, which is the notion of your child being at home and then the homeschooling part, and then they're expected to do their jobs. And
Right.
finding that all of us, just the experience of not being able to do multiple things at the same time, that really has overwhelmed a lot of people. I think that's been one big theme for people that have resources, that have a job and are trying to maintain it, but have kids as well.
That's something that I was thinking about too, are the different roles people are taking on right now, right? And I was thinking about that when it came to just thinking about me being a psychologist, case manager, all these different things. And then now if someone has kids at home, they're parent, teacher, psychologist, you know, delivering groceries, caretaker maybe for elderly or somebody in a vulnerable population. It can be pretty stressful taking on not only all of these roles, but the new roles as well. And then there's the added part of explaining to kids and those who may not understand about what's happening and safety behind it without inducing fear or, I guess, letting our own anxieties kind of flood others.
And I think kind of piggybacking off that a little bit, Carissa, you know, knowing that many people are taking on multiple roles and are likely stressed and anxious and overwhelmed, you know, it's a really important time for us to find creative ways to take care of ourselves. And, you know, with less resources available and things like that, it's a lot more difficult to figure out things to do that are making us feel good. But in order to continue being able to like take on all these roles successfully, we have to engage in self-care as well.
Right. I've seen a lot of things that say, you know, it's social distancing, not social isolation. And we have to be mindful of what that difference is, right? Of getting outside, I went on a walk with a friend earlier and we kept our 6 feet apart, but we were still outside doing something. And just keeping in mind, what are those things that we can do for ourselves and for other people who maybe don't have the opportunity to get outside or go do those.
This is Mary Jo again. I've been dealing with this in my own family, not for me particularly, but my daughter and her husband who have a new baby and whose daycare closed, and they're both working from home, and kind of helping them, well, just talking with them about setting up routines where, you know, they basically switch off who's doing the child care during the day. And doing it in shifts, and then also kind of giving each other a break at times and doing things as a family at times, and, you know, trying to fit in some of those kind of routine opportunities to do some self-care in addition to meeting their responsibilities. And I was thinking with the clients that I'm working with, it's about kind of problem solving their particular situation. If it's particularly difficult if we're talking about a single parent who all of a sudden has a bunch of kids at home and still has a job that they have to do, as opposed to maybe somebody who has a family member, maybe a teenager, who could then, you know, take on some of the responsibility. So I do think it calls on our creativity in terms of problem solving in each particular situation about what options are available. And then, you know, even if it's just the social connecting, like each evening I will touch base even for a few minutes with my daughter just to kind of let her vent and to kind of catch up. That definitely helps me, but I also know that it helps her, and you know, and it then also helps me when I'm talking to patients that are dealing with some of those situations about what's worked in our situation. So I just throw that out for some ideas that might be helpful.
Thank you. I think that's great. And just reminding us that we're kind of all doing this together, right? I think it's pretty new for probably everyone. And we're going through a lot of the same experiences that our patients are going through. And I think, like I said, I wanted this to kind of be a forum where we could share those experiences and what we're doing to see what's been helpful for people, because we're all kind of creating the manual here for this.
Thanks for
Crystal,
mentioning that, Mary Jo.
can you
This
hear
is-
me?
Oh, me speaking.
Crystal Oswald.
Crystal,
Go
if you'd like to go
Oh,
ahead,
okay.
and then Elizabeth.
I just want to make sure you can hear me. I am
Yep.
temporarily out in LA. My husband has a job out here, and I was in Ohio. And I can tell you, LA is a lot more restrictive. And there is a police presence out here that you have to have papers on you to be essential. People are being stopped. But I went to the grocery store the other day, and the elderly people can get in at 7:45 at my grocery store. So I went, and what was interesting, just people standing in line, 6 feet apart, of course, were very chatty about what was going on. So it's almost like group therapy in the grocery line. And they were very willing to talk about it. And I slipped in there towards the end, you know, that I'm a psychologist. And even going through the store, when I would see a worker, I would stop and say, hey, how are you doing? The checkers were very chatty too about what was going on. So we all can do that. But it just surprised me how much people want to talk, and the elderly are so isolated. The grocery store has become the new, you know, social place for them. And they could get in and get out. I'm not old enough to get in early, but I could stand outside and talk to people.
And that brought me back to what I was saying earlier about just reminding yourself to say thank you when you're going through the grocery line, and you know, do any sort of kindness and communication that we can have with people. That might be all they get all day or all
That's
week
right.
even. Elizabeth, you had
Absolutely.
something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on the comments and suggestions that Mary Jo made, which I think are spot on. It's the same things that we've been utilizing in our home, and the same advice I've been giving to my patients. I work with children and adolescents. And one thing that I first tried in my home and then gave advice for my patients that seems to be working is I allowed my kids, my fifth grader and my second grader, to come up with the daily routine. And of course, you know, it had to go through me for, but when it looked like it was, you know, fairly reasonable, included all the elements that needed to be in there, they ran the show. I also have a 2-year-old at home. So in between the times that they get their academic work done, they've got playtime. They've got time where they help out their little sister and get her food. So I've given them more responsibility than what they've ever had, and they're loving it. Just because they feel like they're contributing members in the household. So I would just want to throw out there that it's okay for parents to give their children, their older children, a little bit more responsibility in a time like this, so that they can feel like they're being supportive as well.
That's so important. And I think
Yeah,
that's
I was
great.
going to say something else about school for Elizabeth. That's great. I love your kids designing it with you being the review board. But I think that teachers have been terrific about supporting families. I think one other thing we can do is encourage our families, if they need some assistance from a teacher in helping to roll out material, to reach out, you know, to at least take the shot at reaching out. One of the groups that's really, as happens often, people with special needs are even more underserved later. Special needs kids are having trouble. So reaching out to special needs teachers of those children who are really, from their end, having a hard time. How do you roll out a curriculum that's individualized for everyone? But reaching out individually, it's imperfect. It won't work for everybody, but they're a really terrific resource. And so many teachers are willing to step in and do extra, to really be the volunteers for helping parents out with delivering curricula. So encouraging our clients, or knowing that ourselves, is another maybe useful hack.
And I think one really important theme I'm hearing throughout is have empathy and kindness for everyone. Because I think that people are quick to judge and be irritable and overwhelm themselves. But you're right, everybody's trying to find their way, and everybody's got their own set of stressors. Looking at the time, we do need to move over to Sarah with the student loan talk. And then again, hopefully we'll have some time at the end to circle back if we need to.
And feel free to email me any questions anybody has. Like I said, if you didn't hear any resources in your area today, or there aren't any on the sheet that I'll send out, please feel free to reach out and let me know, and I'll make sure we can get some over to you. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so just for time, because I feel like people might want to trickle back to some of the other topics as well, I think what I'm going to do is go through some of the updates related to student loans as a result of this crisis. And then if there's questions or follow-up discussion related to that, we can go into that. Or if people want to trickle back to other things, then we can do that as well. So in terms of student loan updates, so they have put a policy in place that there will be 0% interest for at least 60 days. With the stimulus package, it looks like some of these things might be changing, but right now the loan websites have not fully updated their policies in regards to what the stimulus package is saying. So it's definitely 0% interest, and nobody is accruing interest at this time that has student loans. And if you continue to make your monthly payments, your payments are not going to decrease due to the 0% interest rate. So I think a lot of people are wondering, do I have to pay less now? And the answer, I guess, is no. But if you are on an income-based repayment plan and you are having more financial hardship than you were before, you can request for your payment to be reduced. And all payments still being made, they are going to go towards satisfying pre-existing unpaid interest. So they're not going to the principal balance at this time if payments are still being made. If you do end up continuing with payments interest off, then that rest would go to the principal balance from there, but all payments are going towards interest at this time if they're continuing to be paid. Okay, now where it gets a little tricky, because this has changed and there's kind of conflicting information on the loan websites versus what the stimulus package is saying, is that at this point, anyone can request an emergency administrative forbearance if they feel unable to pay for their student loans at this time. So that's going to allow people to postpone payments without penalty. Additionally, anybody that has been delinquent in terms of their student loans immediately go into administrative forbearance, so they're not being penalized. And where it gets a little tricky in terms of information is like Fed loan servicing and Department of Education had up there, if you decided to do an administrative forbearance, that your months that you're missing payment wise would not wouldn't go towards PSLF. So if you are going for a PSLF type plan, or if you're in an income-based repayment, that would not be counted if you decided you needed the administrative forbearance. Now on the 27th, new information is kind of going up there. So I guess, as we hear more or the loan servicing websites are updated, we can update our documents with these policies. With the stimulus package, it is saying that now people on the PSLF or an income-based repayment can go into administrative forbearance, and each month that they are not making a payment would count towards their PSLF qualifying payment list. So it's sort of tricky because not many of the websites have been updated right now, but that's what we're hearing as of the 27th, is that people will have the option to go into administrative forbearance and still have each month count towards their qualifying payment. They also seem to have extended this timeline through September 30th. Do people have questions? I know that was like a lot of information all at once. Do people have questions about those things that were brought up? I don't want to go too quick. No? Okay, I'm going to keep going a little bit because I have a few more points to make. But in addition, if people do put their loans on default and go into administrative forbearance, credit reports, scores, things like that are not going to be impacted. I know some people can get a little worried about things like that. And they also will not do any wage garnishment or tax refund seizures during that. And we also are hearing some information that about 1.8 billion in offsets is going to be refunded to 830,000 borrowers. Now, what that means, if they're going to be giving people some sort of relief in terms of their principal amount, it's kind of unclear, but we are looking for updates on that and how that would play out for people with student loans. Any thoughts on those points, or do people have, you know, people that they're working with? Sorry, my dog's barking. People that they're working with that are experiencing any anxiety related to student loans?
Not that I'm working with in particular, but I do want to say thank you for looking up this information. This is something that I feel like every time I look at it, it's changing and it's different, or there's new information coming out. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
You know, and I think another thing to keep in mind as well is this is really for federal loans, right? So I think a lot of people also have private loans. And unless it's changing within the stimulus package, where we're waiting for all these sort of updates on the websites, it is only for, let me look this up here, U.S. Department of Education loans. So it would include direct loans, federal Perkins loans, and federal family education loans that are held by the ED. So it did say something about commercial lenders that not being eligible for the benefit at this time. So if you do have loans and you're kind of questioning whether or not you sort of qualify for that relief, I would suggest one, contacting your loan servicer just to see their updates on their policies and seeing if your loan would be eligible.
Sarah, do you mind sharing where you got some of this information from?
Yeah, so I got a lot of these updates off of the Fed Loan Servicing website. Now, that being said, these policies were updated on March 13th when, you know, the president initially came out and said we were going to be doing the 0% interest rate. There was an update on March 20th related to some of these policies. And then with the stimulus package being approved, I am assuming next week they will be updated again, kind of regarding this public service loan forgiveness aspect and the payments, you know, going towards that as well. But when I checked before we met, those updates were not on the website as of now. So you really can find I did find that each website had their own Q&A for coronavirus related concerns with loans. So that's where I got a lot of this information, and there will be a Q&A fact sheet going out in regards to loan payments.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have more questions or thoughts on that topic? I know it was more information based for people to sort of get that info.
And if not, might I suggest we go ahead and go back to topics 1 and 2. We've got about 20 minutes left. If folks have additional questions about the unemployment and the food insecurities, please go ahead and ask.
Hi, this is Elizabeth again. I just wanted to reiterate that for the things that OPA is doing for the community, this is the committee that organizes those efforts. So far, they're talking about the things that the committee is working on, some things that maybe were missing that we had hoped to get reestablished, but also there's some things I would imagine that maybe might be of interest or of need to others that we haven't thought of yet. So if there's anyone who has any suggestions on what this committee should be working on that could be helpful, feel free to throw that in too.
Off topic, but the billing situation changes daily. And I wonder if there's anything on, the website to go to. I'm going to every website that insurance has, that different insurances have, and it is causing a great deal of stress.
And if I can answer that, Kathy. So hopefully you're following the listserv. Jim Broyles is our insurance guy for OPA and is in private practice, and he's been amazing in keeping up with all the resources and making sure that the information is all credible. So he's doing those postings on the listserv. That information is also being posted on the website. And last week we had 2 telehealth Q&A forums, and there's going to be another one this Tuesday. Those are incredibly popular. The first 2 filled all 50 registrants in a matter of hours. I'm not sure if Tuesday's night is full or not, but because we're just trying to keep current with answering those questions and staying on top of that and giving you the best information for your practice. So please keep an eye on the emails for that as well.
One thing I would mention too is you might want to, if you get a moment, also go to the APA website. There's a tremendous amount of resources on that website, including, we're building it as we speak. We've just built it in the last week. There's a portion of that website now where other psych associations from around the world are sharing their information in multiple languages. So even though some of that might be, some of it is country specific, some of it is not. And so we have Arabic, German, Korean, Italian, most of the countries where they've been majorly affected by that. We have information in all of those languages. If that helps, if you have communities with people that are having some language difficulties working in English, that might be helpful. And also there's some tremendous resources on the website in general that I'd recommend that you take a look at. We've been trying to push them out as quickly as we can possibly, factually generate them. And I think that's the hard part, and keep up with them as well. So I know Jim's getting a lot of his information from APA as well. There may be other directorates that are providing information that would be very relevant to some of you as well.
Elizabeth, in answer to your question about possibly other topics or areas to be looking at, I'm wondering about housing insecurity and/or homelessness, and the changings. And again, another area that, in the best of times, is incredibly challenging. But how we can adapt to be of more assistance there.
I think that's definitely an area that can be helpful. I can't speak to homelessness and housing insecurity as a whole, but I know while I was looking for information in regard to food insecurity, the Ohio Department of Education on their website has some information for homeless students that can be helpful as a place to reach out. But again, as a committee as a whole, that's something we can definitely be thinking about and looking into.
And I think a lot of domestic violence shelters are asking for extra help because people are now trapped inside with their abusers.
And you know what Michael mentioned before, which was a wonderful idea. I think that this is a good opportunity, again, for us to reach out to our colleagues in social work and casework and see what it is that they're doing in regard to some of these concerns and see if we can collaborate on it. Probably something we've had on our minds but haven't put into actual practice yet. So maybe one thing that might change after this call is having this committee involved in making that connection. Thank you for that.
I wanted to ask just this a more general question. I have a few patients for whom that I'm still seeing face to face, despite the the telehealth option, because of their unique clinical needs. And I'm just checking in about, are other people doing that as well? I mean, of course, with precautions and trying to therapy at 6 feet and all that with sanitizing, but are other people doing that as well?
Yes,
I did.
I'm doing that. I have a staff in Ohio of 7 people. What I found is that the elderly want to come in. It's their adult children that don't want them to come in.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's my son who doesn't want me to be doing this.
Yeah.
I did go in, but I have asthma, and the more that I sprayed Lysol, the more I was having complications. So I just decided, it's got to be telehealth for me. And everybody's been so understanding.
Yes.
And I've actually had to coach people how to get on to the telehealth platform.
Yes. I've noticed that my victim survivors have actually talked better on the telephone. Has anybody else found that? They're more comfortable. They don't have to look at me.
Not maybe with that population specifically, but I was speaking to a woman who I did an intake with over the phone, and she said, I feel like I'm telling you a lot more than I would have if we were sitting face to face.
How
Yes.
interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, Elizabeth and Carissa and I, we all work at UH, and we are currently, none of us are seeing patients in the office. I think, initially it was an option if we needed to, but now they're sort of pushing for telehealth only. But if the people that we're seeing don't have the resources to engage in telehealth, we have the option of going into the office to use that resource themselves. But we are not required to sit with them face to face. I'm finding that I feel more exhausted with this setup of like phone and video, but I do think that most of my patients, I was having a lot of cancellations before they put this in place, and most of my patients don't feel safe coming into the office anyways. We work in a larger building where there's a lot of people going in and out. So, and the basement of our parking lot was turned into like a testing site. And so I know a lot of my people were worried about even parking in the parking lot. So it's an interesting dynamic, but I think I'm more tired from the phone calls than anything.
We're all tired.
Yes.
I work on an inpatient medical rehab hospital, and so I am still going into work every day and rounding on my patients every day in person. It's very stressful to see how my colleagues are handling that, especially the physical therapists and the nurses who have direct contact with the patients every day. And we've had a number of patients who've tested negative for COVID, one we're still waiting on, but again, trying to figure out, well, what do we do if we know we may have been exposed, and how do we adjust for that while waiting for test results? It's been a struggle.
I have a private practice,
I
and what we've been
think
doing
another
is
comment
that,
I wanted to make was,
Crystal and Elizabeth, you guys are on the same wavelength every time.
we are.
I think Crystal was just a little
Go
bit
ahead.
ahead. If we'll go for Crystal and then Elizabeth.
Go ahead.
okay. I have a private practice in a rural area in near Saline, Ohio. And what I found is that we're just wiping doorknobs like crazy, but we don't have the person come into the office until we text them to come in. They wait in their cars and then come in. We have people that just insist. So to answer Bill's question, I'm still seeing probably 60% of people face to face. And my therapists don't really want to work from home because they have small children. So they want to come into the office. I'm worried more probably about my secretaries, going back to that unemployment question. My secretaries have taken a hit. The therapists are okay. So with the secretaries, would they be eligible for that unemployment? Because their hours have really been cut.
Yeah, so kind of going back to that, if their hours have been cut, then they are eligible to apply on the unemployment website I haven't actually had to fill out an application myself, so I haven't looked at the different questions on there, but I'm assuming there's a question that like, you know, are you partially employed? Are you fully unemployed? And then you would have to report what your income is and how it's been reduced. And then they would figure out what benefit you would qualify for
Okay,
to supplement.
thank you.
Huh?
And now to Elizabeth, which might be our last question. We've got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, it was just really a statement. And that is in my experience with this so far with telehealth, what I'm finding is that some people have agreed to it and other people are still preferring the phone. So we also have to keep in mind that some people aren't comfortable on the screen or in front of a camera, even if you tell them that it's not being recorded. So it part of our social responsibility too, I believe, as psychologists, is to continue to impress upon the insurance companies, and of course with the help of Jim Broyles, to let them know that sometimes video audio isn't always feasible.
I've had that same experience where some patients prefer the video, whereas some say, no, thank you, I'd rather talk over the phone. And I guess, and really respecting that choice for them and making sure that they know that either is an option.
Sorry to backtrack a little, Crystal. I just wanted to let you know that on my question and answer sheet for unemployment, there is going to be instructions on how to go online and apply if you wanted to share that with your staff.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any continued or any other questions from our audience? Because I'm wondering, I was going to limit this to Sarah and Carissa to offer some summative statements, but I actually wonder if there's other audience members that might want to just share one important takeaway, something you're going to do different going forward after getting all these wonderful resources and information. All right, then I'll put it back to Sarah and Carissa if you just wanted to add any sort of final comments.
Yeah, so I think just to point out again that there is the chat side, and a lot of people have been sending in resources that maybe we haven't talked about. So to be sure to take a look at that before signing off. And then, as you know, we've said a few times, we'll be sending out some resource pages for individuals. Some of the resources on what I'll be sending are the food banks in the areas that are helping with SNAP benefits, that are handing out food and delivery services and having drive-through food drives, as well as, I don't think we mentioned this, but the National Guard has been sent out to multiple food banks throughout the Ohio area, or throughout Ohio in general, and they're helping with delivery, with packing, sorting, all of those things because of the lack of volunteers that they've had recently. And again, if anybody would like to email me anything, any questions that you have, any resources that aren't included on what I'll be sending out, please do so. And thank you all for coming in today.
And yeah, the webinar is recorded and will be posted as well. So if you wanted to go back and read through the chat, you have that option as well.
Oh,
Sarah,
awesome.
go ahead.
I didn't realize we are able to go look through the chat again, so that's great news.
My understanding, but
okay. So similarly, same kind of takeaway message as Carissa, we thank everybody for coming. I broke down my 3 different resource sheets based on topics. So one's going to be all about student loan kind of questions and answers. The other is going to be about the stimulus package, just updates with that. And then we also have a Q&A on unemployment and information on those topics. So there will be 3 separate documents. Karen has all 3, so she should be sending it to the group after the meeting concludes. Things are ever changing, so You know, these are also going to go on the OPA website on our resource page, but as things change, I will update the documents and then probably send them back to Karen, who will then repost them. So, you know, this might not be like the final stage of information, especially with every new development of things going on.
All right, well, I think this was wonderful and helpful and inspiring too. It's easy to feel very discouraged during these times, and to know that there are so many people coming together and offering support is really uplifting. Thank you very much to Dr. Zarrill and Fogarty for all of your time. Thank you to the audience for your contributions, and stay well, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.